Hello and welcome back. This is Jennifer from Positively Learning. If you caught the last episode, which was 105, you know that we talked all about navigating communication with families and some of the trickier scenarios that can come with it. Today, we're building on that conversation with a topic that can sometimes feel a little intimidating. It's what to do when a family advocate will be attending the next IEP meeting. Hey, special educators, I'm Jennifer from Positively Learning. Welcome to the Special Educators Resource Room. If you're like me, you're always looking for ways to save time and streamline your work. That's why this podcast was created, to give you the systems and solutions you need to get your time back. Tune in for tips, tricks, and tools that will help you manage your workload and make the most of your time. Whether you're brand new or experienced, all are welcome in the Special Educators Resource Room. I have two quick tips to share before we dive in. Number one, I highly recommend listening to the previous episode before this one. It's episode 105. I think it does a good job of setting up the framework and providing the perspective of where I'm coming from. And two, I have been wanting to record a holiday episode for you, and I just can't get there. Every time I sit down to try, I think about last year's holiday episode, which is number 50, and I just don't have anything new to add. That episode is called Holiday Ideas Minus the Meltdown, and it's one of the most popular episodes. It's basically sharing some ideas to have the holidays without completely throwing your routine out the window, and I just don't have anything new to add. So I'm going to link that one in the show notes. Let me know if you have any questions. I'd be happy to record a new episode, but I also want to respect your time. All right, let's get started with talking about advocates. First, let me say this. You're not alone if you ever felt a wave of stress hearing that a family is bringing in an advocate to your next meeting. It's completely normal to feel a little nervous. But here's the truth. Advocates aren't automatically a sign of conflict. In fact, they are often there to help the process run more smoothly and to support the family in understanding their child's educational needs. This episode is full of practical strategies to navigate the situation, and I'm going to be sharing my own experiences both as a special educator and as an advocate who's sitting at the table. Let's start by defining what a family advocate is and what they do. A family advocate is someone the family brings in to support them during the meeting. This could be a professional advocate, an attorney, or even a trusted friend who understands the special education process. Their role is to help the family feel informed, ask questions, and ensure the meeting stays focused on the student's needs. Now, of course, it can feel a little intimidating having someone, quote unquote, on the family side. But here's the thing. You and the advocate actually have the exact same goal. You're both there to ensure the student has the support they need. So when we reframe it that way, it becomes easier to see them as a potential partner and not an opponent. If you just did a major eye roll because you've sat in meetings with advocates and it didn't feel like a partnership, please stay with me. I've had that experience too, and I'll be sharing more about that as we go on. Let's start from the beginning. Imagine this. You've just gotten an email that says this advocate will be attending the next meeting. Your first reaction might be a little uncertainty and maybe some stress. Why? What does this mean? Are they upset? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a deep breath and reframe the situation. An advocate's presence is often a sign that the family wants to be fully engaged and feel supported, which is a good thing. So instead of worrying, let's try this approach. Number one, get curious. If you're unsure why the advocate is attending, ask. Ask the caregiver directly. Thanks for letting me know. Is there anything specific you'd like to address in this meeting? And number two, loop in the entire team. Share this update. Be sure to share it with admin and the case manager. This ensures everyone is on the same page. The key here is to stay calm and be proactive. By preparing ahead of time, you're going to feel more confident when the meeting day arrives. So we're going to go through these preparation steps, and there's no reason to feel overwhelmed. These are things you are already doing. Preparation is our best friend. So here's what I would suggest doing before the meeting. Number 1, review the student's file. Make sure you're up to date on progress and accommodations. I know you are, but I also recommend reading the previous meeting notes. Number 2, gather the data. Bring the work samples, assessment results, any progress monitoring data. Again, I know you're doing this, but I suggest bringing as many concrete examples. It speaks volume in these situations, so more concrete, like numbers, versus anecdotal notes. And number 3, understand your district's policies. If you're unsure about a specific service or procedure, reach out to admin, or if you have an IEP chair or special education coordinator beforehand. You are prepared. So now let's talk about what happens when you're actually in the meeting. And the advocate maybe is starting to ask tough questions or push back on something. These moments can feel tense, but it's also where your professionalism can shine. So here's how I suggest handling it. Take a deep breath. Do not let someone throw you off your game by rushing you. If you feel your nerves creeping in, pause. Pause for a moment before responding. By staying calm, you are setting the tone in the room. I'm not saying an advocate will do this, but I've been in meetings before where someone's interrupting, pushing back, raising their voice, talking fast, and it's a tactic. And it probably works for them, but you don't need to react to that. Number 2, stick to the data. Let the student's progress and performance guide the conversation. It's not all about you. It's not all about the advocate. It's about what's happening with the student. So you could start a conversation based on the recent assessments. Here's what we've observed. Number 3, don't get defensive. We want to think collaborate, don't defend. If the advocate is suggesting something new, keep an open mind. You could say, thank you for bringing that up. Let's explore how that might fit into the plan. The goal is to keep the focus on the student and work as a team, even if this conversation feels challenging. Remember I said earlier I was going to share my own experiences, both as a special educator and as an advocate. Yes, I decided to become an advocate. One thing to know about me is I'm a geek. I love special education law. I love debating, talking about it. I just find it fascinating. So that's a great reason to become an advocate to help families. But I admit I also had an ulterior motive. I was seeing a lot of advertisements from people and an organization that was promoting becoming an IEP advocate. So I was curious. I decided to dive in. I really didn't like the tone that I was seeing. It seemed very much advocates and families versus the school. So I decided to become certified as an advocate. And I will tell you, the process was interesting. First of all, once I got into it, that tone really diminished and I was very pleasantly surprised. I'm not sure why the advertising on the outside was very negative in my opinion, but the inside was very much about helping the family, for which I was glad. But the rest of the process, I can sum it up by saying it was very light, didn't really go in depth, and I didn't really learn anything new, which isn't a big surprise with a special education background, but it was a very fast process. It didn't really get into the weeds too much. It reminded me of my own experiences as a special educator working with advocates. I've met more than a few advocates sitting at the IEP meeting table that were wonderful humans. Their heart was in the right place. They were supporting the family. They loved this child, but I realized they didn't have the strongest background. And we quickly joined forces as a team when they realized that we were also there for the exact same reason. I felt like we spent some of the meeting teaching the advocate what we were doing. They would ask a question that clearly showed that they weren't exactly sure what was happening, and we would answer the question. So the meeting took longer because we were kind of training this advocate as we went. But you know what? That's fine because we all left with a better understanding. And that's what's important. That child got what they needed and everybody felt heard. After a few experiences like that, I realized having an advocate at the meeting wasn't something I really needed to worry about. It may have been a sign that we had to improve communication before we got to the table, and we can own that. But of course, there's other situations where the advocate isn't coming there to be warm and fuzzy, and this advocate is extremely prepared. I've had that experience too. And sometimes even with the best preparation, an advocate might choose a more confrontational tone. And that can feel really tough, but it's important to remember you have the tools to handle these moments. Here's what I suggest doing. Always redirect back to the student. If the conversation feels like it's becoming unproductive, or maybe it's becoming overly critical, you can always bring it back to the purpose. You could say, I hear your concerns, and I'd like to focus on how we can support Jennifer most effectively. And you can set boundaries if you need to. If that tone crosses and feels more disrespectful, it's okay to pause the meeting. You could say, I'd like to take a moment to ensure we're all working together productively for Jennifer. And document everything. Keep detailed notes of what's discussed, especially if the advocate's raising concerns or suggestions. This ensures clarity and accountability moving forward. Now I'm ready to share my experience about an advocate that didn't go so well. This family brought a lawyer. He was well-versed in the law, not so much in the education and district policies, but he didn't seem to care about that. He had an end goal in mind for this family, and he came ready to do combat. He did not seem like he wanted to collaborate. He used a lot of tactics like interrupting, negativity, and bullying. It was a most unpleasant experience. While I still suggest the earlier strategies of pausing, staying calm and professional, sticking to the data, documenting everything, and keeping the focus on the student, it also helps to understand why the family brought this guy. What was he doing there? And in this case, this family was pushing for another setting, a private school for their child. I loved this family, but they were acting like bulldogs. They were ready for battle because they wanted their child in this private school and they wanted us to pay for it. This family thought that this was what was best for the child. And who can fault a family for wanting what's best? Now, it ended up not being successful because this lawyer really did not understand special education policy, but it did help me reframe my thinking on working with advocates. We can't control whether an advocate is going to be at our next meeting or not, but we can be prepared and stay professional, both things I know you're already doing. Before we wrap up, here's a few proactive strategies to keep in mind. Number one, you can build strong relationships with caregivers and families. If we have regular, open communication, that can help reduce misunderstandings and maybe make advocates less necessary. We can also invite collaboration early. If you know an advocate is attending, you could ask the family ahead of time what they'd like to focus on in this meeting. And then, of course, seek support when needed. Don't hesitate to loop in admin or special education coordinator if you feel unsure about anything. And let's wrap up with this thought. Having a family advocate in the room doesn't have to feel intimidating. You're an advocate. You are prepared. You are professional. You have a student-focused mindset. You truly have this. And the work you're doing is so important. So hang in there. Let me know how it's going. And maybe I can just lighten the mood for the next episode during this holiday season. I appreciate you listening. I'll catch you next time in the Special Educators Resource Room. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'm dying to ask, what'd you think? Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe buttons so that you never miss an episode. You can find the show notes and links for everything mentioned in this episode at positivelylearningblog.com. See you next week for more special education solutions.